Hey guys, I'm out here in my skivvies for the anniversary of the Chosin Reservoir. Basically show you guys what a Marine would have been wearing in Chosin when temperatures hit at the coldest point, minus 38 degrees Fahrenheit. So I actually tried to do this in my basement and get dressed down there, and I almost heat cased, which led me to do this outside. So first I have my base layer. I have cotton GI underwear on, cotton socks, which Marines would have been wearing at the time. Some had wool socks, some had cotton socks, and then a wool base layer. So I'm going to go ahead and put my first layer on. So for my bottoms, it's going to be basically the standard summer combat uniform. So P41s, maybe a mix of P44s or P47s. The manual also calls for Marines to have their wool service uniform. So think your green service alphas. But at the time, a lot of Marines didn't have them, or they would have just had these combat uniforms that if they were a member of the 5th Marines, they would have been wearing since Pusan. So I imagine a lot of the Marines would have just kept these on. There's more pockets, but of course, they're not as warm as that wool service uniform, which Marines used as a combat uniform up until World War II, really. So next is going to be a wool sweater here. The standard like 5-button GI sweater. We go and throw that on. So really Chosin started for the Marines of the 5th Marine Regiment on this November 27th. And for 3-5 specifically, it was interesting because they were relieved by Task Force Faith, notably the Army's 31st Regimental Combat Team, which then was essentially wiped out, and that was held by 3-5 until basically the night before that happened. So I got my wool sweater on. Next, I am going to go put a portion of that service uniform on, which is going to be this wool service shirt. And get this buttoned up here. And then on the 27th, basically, 5th and 7th Marines were brought back to a perimeter at Udom, where the two regiments basically combined under one leadership group with Colonel Litzenberg and Lieutenant Colonel Murray. So I have my wool shirt on, tuck it in here, keep it out of the way. Hopefully it doesn't interfere with the mic too much. New mic, hopefully that's working out okay. It's a little windy out here, and my neighbors are probably going to call the police in a second. I'm going to go ahead and put that combat top on, so just a standard P41 top. And again, I would imagine Marines were really putting on any layer they could, whether it be wool or not, just to continue to break the wind and keep warm. Next, I'm going to go ahead and put on my M43 trousers. These were like Army standard issue in World War II in Europe. And then they got to the Marines, who obviously didn't really fight in any colder climates in World War II. But then when we get to Korea, the Marines use these pretty heavily as well. And I have boondockers on my feet. A lot of Marines continued to wear the standard leather boondocker that was standard in World War II and continued to wear in Korea. I have shoe packs here. I'll put those on. The problem with the shoe packs was they were so warm that as you moved, if you stopped, your feet would sweat. They would actually get worse frostbite because now they were wet. So it's something Marines had to be very cautious about, where probably in the boondockers they felt they were lighter, they were more comfortable, and their feet weren't going to sweat. So it might have been colder, but their feet weren't going to sweat and ironically get frostbite. So I'm actually going to put these on while I still have some mobility in my upper body. And most of this stuff is original, just as a note. I think the service shirt was not, and the wool sweater was not, but everything else is original. So again, these are like the predecessor to the vapor barrier boots that we wear today. And they called for the trouser pant to be tucked in to prevent wind from really coming up your trouser leg, and also kind of shed that rainwater off. Next, I'll put my M43 top on. And I'm sure you can tell it's starting to get a little bit heavy to move. And you'll see, especially with the parka, which is very heavy and very long, that a lot of Marines who are shorter back then than I am now at 6 foot and lighter reduce mobility a lot. But when temperatures are pretty much hanging far below zero, there's not much you can do. So the M43 trousers, usually called for suspenders. I'm just going to put a belt on here. So Chosin, obviously, so with 5th and 7th Marines hung out up north at UDOMNI from basically 27 November until 1 December. And the 1st of December, they decided to break out. 7th Marines had some issues breaking south. So it was actually 3-5 that went from the furthest north position and basically fought a fighting withdrawal back and led the breakout down the MSR south. And they would reach Toktong Hill or Toktong Pass or Fox Hill on December 3rd. And that's where a lot of the complaints with the shoe packs came in, because Lieutenant Colonel Tapless and my Marines have been moving south. We've been fighting up mountains, up these hills for 3 days straight. If we stop, we just got to keep moving. If we stop, we're going to basically, all these Marines are going to get frostbite because we've been sweating. We just need to keep moving. He was overridden. 7th Marines kind of took the lead in the break route south to Hagaruri, and a lot of 3-5 Marines suffered frostbite because of that decision. Okay, I'm going to move. I got my K-bar here. Normally I'd mount that to my my belt or my cartridge belt. A lot of hand-to-hand fighting and a fixed blade, especially a hefty knife like the K-bar, was essential not only for opening rations and things like that, but also fighting. So this is the big Marine parka. It's alpaca lined. It's very heavy, but very warm. And it's kind of, I would say, iconic at this point for its look and its length. And it varies a little bit from the Army parka, not to go into it, but there are certain differences where you can tell which was a Marine parka and which was an Army parka. All right, so I'll move into my field gear here. Not to go too in depth or too crazy, but just a standard Grand cartridge belt with canteens. You'd put a dozen different things on here in different ways, whether it be first aid kits or knives, or lay out your canteens different, or different variations of canteens. And as you can see, with the coat on here, it's a struggle and a half to get these shoulder straps over, but we're going to figure it out, because Marines back then did. They probably didn't take it off at all once they started moving. And I don't have any end blocks in here to give it weight, but if I did, maybe it would help. So I have my cartridge belt on here. You could probably loosen a little more, but with all these layers, it's going to be tough to clip. Same thing on my pack here. I'm really interested to see if I can even get this on my back. I just put a generic pack together with, you can see a dozen different examples with shelter halves, sleeping bags, blankets, ponchos, whatever, but just to give you a look of kind of what one would look like in general, or generic pack here. And again, mobility is not the name of the game wearing this. All right, I got my steel pot here. Marines have a variety of different caps and stuff. A lot of times you just see them put their hood underneath it. That's what I'm going to do here. I can't even reach the parka hood to get that over. But sometimes you see the guys pull this number just to get everything. Keep all your body heat in. Put these off to the side. Lastly, again, you see mitts, you see these thin gloves. They're really similar to kind of what we issue today. Not that anyone uses them outside the rappel tower, but it's a wool inner liner and this leather shell. And again, I guess my hands are a little bit bigger than the boys back then were. And I mean, I'm warm now, but I'm in Udomni, Pennsylvania, not Udomni, Korea. So I can imagine it would be significantly colder. Oh, I lost the keeper here. And lastly, the M1 Garand. Guys love the Garand. It was pretty reliable even in the cold. They could run it dry, which was really the issue with freezing, was the lubricants or things that were required to keep the weapon firing for the machine guns and stuff. But the Garand is pretty reliable, and worst case, it could be shot round by round by racking the op rod. And they felt the carbines especially were just underpowered, couldn't push through the quilt lined jackets that the Chinese were wearing, and that 30-06 from the Garand packed a huge punch. Also, a lot of guys picked up Thompsons. Thompsons had been given on lend-lease to the nationalist Chinese, which were then co-opted by the communist Chinese. So then troops fighting in Korea were ironically, or sadly, using American weapons. So this is basically what it looks like. I don't have my shoes tied up or anything, but just kind of a generic look at what a Marine in the Chosin Reservoir would be wearing. You could call it a strip tease in reverse. It's actually kind of mimicking a leatherneck article from the 50s that I'll post up and how a Marine would be wearing. So with some variation, you can see a ton of different things. Of course, there's a whole division out there. So guys are wearing things differently. Guys are wearing different things. But this is my attempt to give you like an 80% solution, just an idea of what a Marine would be wearing in the reservoir. I hope this was interesting, informative, and you'll come back for more.